I know what you're thinking. This guy's crazy. This guy's a homer. This guy's full of crap. And you'd be right about all of those things. But I do have some points to make. Texas A&M is the most underrated team in the country going into week 4. And I know that sounds crazy, but let me talk. Every week I do kind of a lay of the land video midweek. I look at the previous body of work for A&M season, including the most recent game, of course. And I also like to listen to the various talking heads and pundits throughout the country, see what their takes on A&M are going into the next week of games. And if any of y'all have been paying attention, people just can't seem to get the offense, Texas A&M's deficiencies, Jimbo Fisher's play calling, all that stuff. They can't seem to get that stuff out of their mouth. Understandably so. It's kind of been the story of the year so far. I mean, Texas A&M lost an inexplicable game at home. Apparently, scoring 17 in a win at home versus Miami isn't enough, which I get it. If you watch the game, Texas A&M's offense still doesn't look like anything close to a well-oiled machine. But that seems to be the fixation. So I want to get into this. I want to kind of talk about Texas A&M, what needs to change, what's been happening, what we're looking at going forward. But in doing so, I want to talk about how this team is underrated, because there are many reasons for hope with this team. Let's get into it. As I said, everybody can't seem to get the offense out of their mouth, and I understand it. That's the highlight of the year so far, if you're a talking head that wants to talk negatively about Texas A&M. The offense hasn't been good. But that is blinding people to the fact that Texas A&M has one of the best strengths in all of the country right now. A defense that has only given up 2 touchdowns so far this season, none to Miami, who is supposed to have a great offense with an elite quarterback who's an NFL prospect, a running back who's been absolutely tearing it up all year, and they haven't given up a touchdown to that team. The best opposition yet, no touchdown. 2 touchdowns on the season. Texas A&M is giving up 8.5 points per game right now. And these are all overarching numbers. What do numbers even mean? Well, Texas A&M has a very strong position group right now that would rival any in the country when healthy and all playing together, and that is its secondary. Last week, we didn't see the Texas A&M secondary at its full strength. We didn't see that the first 2 weeks of the year. Jalen Jones, Texas A&M junior cornerback, has been out the whole season until he played versus Miami, much more than he initially thought he might, I would assume, because Brian George, the other starting corner, missed the game because of a targeting call and an ejection in the first quarter, which, targeting, And then Damani Richardson, also ejected, targeting, first quarter versus Miami. Senior, he started like 30-something games. He is clearly the stabilizer in the defense at safety. Looking like he's having a career year, just the glimpses we've seen of him. A force in the run game and the pass game. Those guys didn't play last week because of targeting. But the secondary still was able to tackle well, and when Miami got into the red zone, prevent Miami from scoring. Touchdowns, that is. This secondary, when healthy, could be what takes this defense to an even higher level. Because these defenders that are missing games, you have Damani, Brian George, Jalen Jones, who have all missed games and not played in a game together this season for a full game. These guys are all not only great in the passing game, but have high upside in the run game for defensive backs. Because one of the only deficiencies on this defense, and it's a pretty important deficiency, is the run defense numbers. Miami was able to run all over Texas A&M's defense, and so was App State. Now, Texas A&M has a very young defensive line. They rotate several freshmen and even more inexperienced non-freshmen. You look at Shamar Stewart, Anthony Lucas, LT Overton. They're getting many snaps a game, and they have all the talent in the world. They don't have the experience, but they have all the talent in the world. How many games does it take for these guys to stop looking like green true freshmen? Well, they already don't really look like that. They already are flashing talent, just not on a consistent basis. But when you get guys like that, and guys like Timnise Adelie, Fadil Diggs, Shamar Turner, who is looking like he's going to be that guy, you get McKinley Jackson back, who is hopefully going to be back versus Arkansas. We don't know yet. And the emergence of other guys like Albert Regis, Isaiah Rakes, who we knew about already, who's still playing and still the clogger up front. I think this run-stop defense has a lot of potential that could be shown as soon as versus Arkansas. Because when you get, also Walter Nolan, number 2 recruiting prospect of 2022, he's back this weekend as announced by Jimbo. And he's a guy that'll play DT, clog up the middle. He commands to a double team already as a true freshman that's a tad under 300 pounds. This guy is a force. He's super explosive. He's not going to play the whole game because no one on this D-line needs to play the whole game with the depth Texas A&M has there, especially when healthy. When they get him, Eni White has missed a game. He'll be back. Freshman edge guy. McKinley Jackson, as I said, should be back. You get all these guys back, but more importantly, you get these guys experience, and then you get that secondary healthy and all playing together. All of these big-bodied, Texas A&M has great tacklers at DB. All those guys that I mentioned, Antonio Johnson, Jalen Jones, as made extremely evident in that Miami game where he had a career game, especially in the tackling department. Overall, best game of his career, right? I mean, that's indisputable. Damani Richardson and Brian George, who's a very physical corner. Those are 4 big physical defensive backs that are probably going to be on the field together for at least 80% of Texas A&M's defensive snaps. These guys are a force, not only in the pass game, but in the run game. We saw what Damani was doing in the early games this year. As soon as his assignment clears, he is all over that run game. He is in the action every play. And that goes for Antonio Johnson, obviously. Brian George, Jalen Jones, if the plays come into their side, you know these guys are getting involved. We saw what Jalen Jones was doing to Parrish Jr. versus Miami. He's able to get these guys on the ground, as are these other DBs. The only position group where A&M defensively has question marks is at linebacker. And it's a weird dynamic because Edge Cooper is a star at linebacker. He's a star. He's not top tier linebacker, but he's a star linebacker. I mean, you'd put him at like a 8.5 out of 10 linebacker. He's quality. He is, as I've always said about him, a missile to the right place at the right time. Now, Andre White, who's supposed to be the other starting linebacker, is out. He has apparently had a knee procedure done, and he's going to miss several weeks. He won't play versus Arkansas. He probably won't play Mississippi State. Maybe he'll be back for Alabama. We don't know. But the other 2 guys, number 23 and 24, they seem to get lost in the shuffle. Although there has been some signs of improvement there, I think they have a ways to go. They get stuck in the trenches. They get clogged up with the flow of the offensive line, and they don't tend to make themselves available for the run-stop game as often as they should. But I've seen some improvement there, but it's still a deficiency. It seems like when running backs are able to get to the second level of Texas A&M's defense, they're able to pick up that 5 to 8 yards pretty consistently if they get past that D-line. But I look for all that to improve, as everybody is looking to improve throughout the season. But I just think with this Texas A&M defense already being very good, and then getting this influx of, well, let's count them. How many players in their rotation will be coming back versus Arkansas? Walter Nolan, Damani Richardson, Brian George, Eni White. Oh, one that I haven't mentioned, Gabriel Brownlow-Dindy has reportedly been practicing. He'll be coming back anytime. When A&M signed this recruiting class, Brownlow-Dindy was one of those guys that I thought was immediately available to play because this guy is extremely stout, physical. He has the body of like a senior or a junior. And he's a top 10 prospect. He has a great family, great head about him. He seems like the kind of guy that can make an early impact. Maybe you get a guy like that in there too. But those guys, and then Smoke Bowie, who's maybe a rotational guy, and Denver Harris, they were both suspended. So they didn't play versus Miami either. Some of these guys haven't been playing throughout the season. Some of these guys just missed the Miami game. But Texas A&M's defense has been bend, don't break throughout the season. And that was made evident in their most talented opposition yet. They gave up 3s instead of 7s. Every time the field shrunk, the defense won. Okay, people talk about that 3-man front. I want to talk about that. The 3-man front that Texas A&M has been rolling out and rolled out heavily again versus Miami. You know, we praise the bend, don't break nature of this defense, yet we're quick to criticize the 3-man front. Now, I get there's some negatives there. You allow the run plays, but Texas A&M was locking up in the red zone. They were versus Van Dyke. It seemed to me that they were conceding some of those big run plays to prevent Van Dyke from throwing receivers open and getting those huge chunk passing plays and allowing a star quarterback to get into rhythm. Now, I don't know so much about it versus App State. I think they kind of abandoned it later into the game once they realized what was going on. But versus Miami, I think it made a lot of sense. And it worked because Texas A&M, as the field shrunk, as I've said like 3 times already, locked up. They didn't want to give up those big pass plays, so they dropped 6 or more because they're only running 2 linebackers, dropping into coverage most of the time. And another argument for the 3-man front, when you have the star power that Texas A&M has, though young, in its defensive line, at some point, relying on a 3-man front with those beasts is going to be something special. Let's say you line up a Shamar Turner, Shamar Stewart, and an Eni White. And these guys no longer look like they're in their first 3 games of their college career. They're living up to what they're supposed to be. Imagine a 3-man front with that, and you get to drop everything else, and those 3 guys alone are able to get pressure, wreak havoc on a quarterback while you drop the rest. We know all too well, think about Arkansas last year, what they did to Texas A&M the whole year, to that young offensive line, the whole game, not the whole year. What they did when they rushed to their 3 defensive linemen and dropped everything back, Calzada looked lost, the offensive line couldn't handle those more mature defensive linemen, and that was the game. That was the story of the Arkansas game. Now Texas A&M has guys that are going to be even better than what Arkansas had versus Texas A&M's offensive line last year. Just think about that potential before you criticize this 3-man front going forward. But I get it. You know, the whole App State thing, they should have rolled out of that earlier. They took a little while to get out of that, to abandon it. That makes sense. But I don't think we should hate on it as much as I've seen. This defense is really salty, guys. I don't think the country is really acknowledging it. I think they're blinded by the offense. The offense has its issues. We got to address them here. Max Johnson looked good. I don't think many people are saying those words, but I'll say it. I'm sure some of y'all are saying it. I mean, think about when Haynes King was out there. You know, you can see the tools that Haynes has. He has the arm strength. Seems like he has the head about him. He just didn't feel secure out there. He didn't look confident out there. He wasn't really able to have like any swag to his step. It seemed like he was thinking really hard. And I think he'll be fine over time. I hope it's with A&M, but you never know. I've been high on Haynes King. But Max Johnson, as soon as he went out there was a poise to him. There was a control that he had over that offense. And there was definitely a swag to him. And when I say there was a swag to him, I mean he's out there dancing with teammates, laughing. Body language looks very positive, and, you know, no lack of confidence in Max Johnson. And you're not going to win a game by having more confidence than the other team. But I think it's a start. And as I said in my last video, I think Max Johnson starting, getting the center back in Bryce Foster, getting your senior tight end back, I think those three positions, specifically quarterback and center, getting your two play callers, your two signal callers back into the offense and letting that thing run its course and letting it reassimilate, I think that marks a fresh start for this offense. And maybe it's sunshine pumping. But things definitely looked more stabilized, at least in lining up, at getting plays in, executing without any kind of franticness happening. It just looked more calm. And there weren't many big plays, but there were some drives where Texas A&M showed promise. That first drive of the game, Texas A&M drove the whole field, only got the field goal. But when have we seen a drive like that the first two games, especially versus App State? Bryce Foster came back. He was battling. I mean, there's no denying that he was in pain, coming off of mono. Probably a situation where if it was a lesser opponent, he would have missed a game again. But with the backs against the wall, he had to play. But just having that presence, the play calling there, he wasn't his typical dominant self, and I think he'd tell you that. But I think we get a big step forward from him going into this week after he gets that one under his belt. And I think just having that communication, getting used to his voice there. Same thing goes for Max Johnson. I think all of that is going to just allow this offense to take further steps forward going into Arkansas, especially with the way Arkansas's defense, specifically the secondary, has looked so far this season. I think that gives A&M a great opportunity. I look for Max to get way more involved this game, especially with the deep threats of Evan Stewart and Chris Marshall coming back from suspension. I want to talk about the suspension, but I'll mention it at the end of the video. But he's going to get a lot of weapons back. This offensive line is improving. We saw some improvement versus Miami, and it wasn't like the grand steps we were needing, we were hoping for. This offense still has not really found its identity. I think its identity right now is A-Chain and Anias, those three words. A-Chain and Anias, that's the offensive identity right now. I don't think that cuts it. But this offensive line showed improvement, especially right on the line of scrimmage. Just one-on-one matchups were not being whiffed on as much as they were the first two games. They still have issues picking up stunts, picking up twists and blitzes, getting to that second level with their block. They're not great at combo blocking. Combo blocking is when two linemen are on one defender, and then they work towards the next level, and one peels off and blocks the next guy. It seems like they're not really doing that too successfully in the run game. I don't know how they're coached. I don't know what's going on there, but I didn't see much of that being executed in the last week's game or at all this season. But as far as straight-up blocks by the offensive line on the defensive line or men who are lined up right in front of them, it looked a lot better in the run game. Now, the pass protection, I wouldn't say it's bad. It's good, but it's shaky. There's some leakage. I don't think there's a lot of jailbreak, but there's some leakage. I look for that to get cleaned up. It's an inexperienced group, surprisingly so, with Bryce Foster missing all of camp, well, most of camp, and the first 2 weeks of the game, and not practicing in spring. So you have 3 new starters to start the year, rather than your expected 2 new starters, which is a big deal on the offensive line, because you're only as good as your weakest link. The left tackle is letting a defender by every time. It's a bad offensive line. Not saying that's happened. Trey Zune actually showed some great improvement last game. But they're taking steps. I saw them take steps, and just getting Bryce Foster back is a huge step in itself. And having him have 2 weeks of practice and a game under his belt going into Arkansas, I think the offensive line improves a lot more this week. The tight ends were not great at blocking this last game, and I think they add to the perception that the offensive line was lackluster. It's Max Wright's first game back at tight end. He's been out battling injury. He clearly had just, some adjustments to make, some cobwebs to shake off. There were some missed blocks on his end, and by Donovan Green, I don't worry about these guys because Donovan Green's a true freshman. He's probably starting and playing a lot more than maybe you would expect. Apparently, Jake Johnson has been injured, and he has not been able to play, so he hasn't really been able to rotate that guy out. But they're not running that much tight end. They're doing a lot of spread. They did run some 2 tight end last game, though, with Max and Donovan. And there were some missed assignments by these two guys. And a lot of those A-Chain getting blown up in the backfield were because of those two guys running wrong plays. And I think it's just shaking off the cobwebs, because I don't see these guys just missing assignments the whole year. And these guys are great when they get bodies on people. I mean, we know Max is great at getting a body on people, and Donovan Green has shown some real physicality in the blocking game. He had that great tight end screen pass to start the game last week. I hope that they continue to expand in the tight end game, because we know how much better Jimbo Fisher is at calling a game when he has a tight end weapon. But the offensive line, I think they're ready to take steps right now. And I think Max Johnson, getting him as your starter, these two are ready to make steps. Now, players that just need to kind of keep status quo, A-Chain and Anaya Smith, the quote-unquote offensive identity to start the year. A-Chain is having just big play after big play with a shaky offensive line and tight end play. I mean, he's still getting it done. And now the offensive line did open up some holes for him last game, but this guy's breaking tackles left and right, accelerating out of nothing, just getting yardage, making big plays. Every touchdown he's had has been, 20-plus yards? I mean, he's a big play guy. And then Anias has just been extremely reliable in the receiving game, the only consistent receiver so far this year. But let's see what happens when Evan Stewart gets back out there, because he was getting serious separation when he was playing. Haynes wasn't necessarily getting him the ball every time, but this guy was getting open consistently, and we were seeing it. And we see how lethal he is with the ball in his hand. And the same goes for Chris Marshall, who is going to be as good a deep threat that's on the team. Well, let's talk about the suspensions real quick, since I mentioned the two guys that were suspended last week. So, of course, I hear about the suspensions from a giddy Longhorn fan in a group text of mine. Evan Stewart suspended, LOL, LOL. Yeah, go hang your banner, buddy. So my first instinct was, especially after seeing some of the shenanigans that happened during the week before from some of these guys, my reaction was, I'm glad Jimbo did it. I'm glad he sent that message. And then I felt like A&M still had a good chance to win the game, even without these guys, because I felt like A&M was still more talented and had that defense. But I was obviously shaken and more nervous and less confident than I was before, but I still felt like A&M could win without them. And I'm guessing the team did too, because as it turns out, the Jimbo put the decision maybe fully or partially onto the leadership council's shoulders. And the leadership council is just some of the leaders on the team getting together and making decisions, getting the coach's message more permeated through the team, getting the team's message to the coaches, that kind of thing. And they're the ones that ended up swinging that axe of the suspension. And I think that was a message sent from the players and the coaching staff to these young guys to get them straightened out. I don't know exactly what that message is, but I think there was a message sent. But yeah, just a tangent on that. I wanted to just mention it. I'm hoping it's a great thing for the team long term. They're going to be back this week, and a lot of injured players are going to be healthy this week, and a lot of players that were missed with targeting last week will be back. So, if for no other reason why I think A&M is underrated, it's because of the players that have been out that are going to be right back. They're here. They're going to play versus Arkansas. Most of them are. And just the sheer ceiling height versus where A&M is on that meter right now. Of course, being underrated probably means you haven't really done what you could do yet. So if A&M just maintains the status quo, goes out there, plays like they did, even exactly like they did versus Miami, probably not going to score enough to keep up with Arkansas. You're going to have to get a couple more touchdowns, and I think there were a couple more touchdowns that could have been had if for better blocking and receiver play, which I think will increase by some margin this week. But if they go out there and they do what they did, no. But one more factor that goes into this team's success going forward, I think the backs are against the wall until you play Bama. So I mean, as far as hitting what the team's goals were for the year, You probably have to beat Arkansas and Mississippi State to do that. And if you don't beat Arkansas and Mississippi State, you're 0-2 in conference play or 1-1. But if you're 1-1 in conference play, you're what, 3-2? And you probably lose to Bama at that point. At Bama, you're going to be 3-3. Backs are firmly and flatly against the wall going forward. And I think that's when Jimbo has called his best games throughout the years as an Aggie. As I've mentioned before, A&M gets blown out by Alabama in 2020, comes back and has a signature win versus Florida. Last year, A&M loses 2 winnable games, one versus Arkansas, one versus Mississippi State at home, beats Alabama. Signature game. A&M loses to App State, comes back, beats Miami at home, signature win, if only because of the stakes. But I would suggest that urgency is still felt in that locker room because of what's on the line. You're going into conference play. The whole world, the whole college football world, doesn't think you have it. And, they have some reason for that. But I just think as far as intangibles go, that one is in the forefront. So, guys, am I pumping too much sunshine here? Probably. But I try to call things as I see it. And if I felt like there was no hope, I'd like to believe I would say there's no hope. And I think we're seeing signs, less maybe than we would hope, but I think there are very clear, evident signs that this team is starting on an upward trajectory. So, sunshine pumping or not, you guys tell me. Do you guys think this team is poised for improvement? Or are you just, Jimbo's got to go, this is not going to work? Where are you at, Aggies? And you non-Aggies that maybe stumbled in here. Do I just sound completely delusional? Probably. I usually do. But I try to make a point or two along the ride. It's like I don't know. It's like a well-controlled train wreck. That's what we do here. But anyways, guys, just give me your feedback. If you guys could like and subscribe. I'm wanting to grow this. I'm wanting to just bring more Aggie content. I love talking Aggie football, but I really love interacting with you guys. If you comment, there's like a 95% chance I'm going to reply unless I somehow don't see it. So, guys, get in there. Trash talk me. Talk all the shit you want. But I'd love to hear your Aggie takes right now. I'm feeling obviously optimistic. Are you? Gig 'em.